Okay. Hi, James.
Hello, Victoria. It's so nice to be here at Greystone Mansion.
So I've travelled a long way to LA to come and meet you. And one of the reasons, as well as loving travelling, is because you've done Get Into Your Body Level 1 and you had a really amazing experience. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your background, but also why you love what we've created with Get Into Your Body Level 1. Okay?
Yeah.
So, because you have your own incredible history with emotional release and different healing modalities.
Right.
Okay.
Well, the foundation of my work and where I come from in my life is emotional healing.
Yeah.
Deep emotional release work. But really behind it is the whole process of enlightenment. From the very, very beginning, that was my only intention.
Okay.
And in a way, I was very lucky to very initially in my process discover what I call the deep emotional release. And it's a function unto itself.
Yeah.
The way I discovered it is I was doing some shamanic work, and I got in touch with this immense field of emotional energy in my body that as I kept processing this deeper and deeper existential dilemma of what is human existence, what is my existence about, what is the pain that I'm carrying.
And our capacity to hold that, be it physical or emotional, just in the body.
Well, it was kind of locked into my body,
Yeah.
and this process I was in, as it started releasing the energy, I noticed that the energy literally moved up the chakra system.
Okay.
And that when it moved into the heart, that's when I started feeling this deep grief.
So for people who don't understand what a chakra is, because not everyone watching this will have that kind of terminology, how would you describe that?
Well, I would describe it that the way the human being, the energetic anatomy is that we have these different vortexes that correspond to different plexi in the body.
Okay.
And they relate to different emotions.
Yeah.
So, and people know what they are, meaning that when you're feeling fear, you have butterflies, it's here in your solar plexus.
100%.
When you're feeling disgust and more of the deeper emotions having to do with shame, it's all down in the belly. And we have that's a lot of times where our digestive problems come from. You feel joy, heart. You feel sadness, heart. People can't express themselves. They can't get in touch with their creativity. It's a block in the throat chakra.
Yeah.
On and on and on.
Yeah. So can I just ask, because obviously in today's world, mental health and everything is a lot more understood and worked with. You see it, there's much more about that. But you started doing this when?
I started doing this work when I was 27 years old.
Which is
50 years ago.
50 years ago.
Okay.
So we're talking before, the world is kind of catching up in some ways, or we'll discuss.
Back then they were.
Yeah, this
No, it
wasn't a
wasn't.
thing. So you were kind of
I was way
a torchbearer.
Right, but I didn't realize that. I
release.
just thought I was suffering.
Yeah, okay. We teach what we need to learn on a
Okay.
daily basis. Yeah.
And what happened was when the emotions started coming up and it broke through the heart, when it hit the throat chakra, I could feel myself wanting to push the emotions back down. And it was a response that I learned how to do when I was a child. And it said, hold your tears, hold your emotions.
Hold it in,
Hold
lock
it
it
in.
in, find a way to accommodate it.
When this released and I started weeping, the energy went to the third eye and I started having visions. I started seeing all this resolution to my existence.
Okay.
But it was only emotional. It wasn't like there was a logical understanding to it. It was just, basically you kind of fucked up and you got to unfuck yourself.
Okay.
And that was the process.
Go on, fuck yourself.
That was the process of unwinding.
Yeah.
But I always would come back to the deep emotional release. And so when the release would occur, the energy would move up. When I started weeping, the throat chakra opened up. Then I would start seeing clearly resolution to my own problems, but I could also start seeing the resolution to the dilemma facing humanity in terms of how we got to this place, in terms of our species history and our collective history. And I couldn't resolve it. There was nothing in our world that would make sense other than the only way out of this dilemma. And when I would see past life energy, I knew that wasn't the way out, because you just kind of take a break and come back and get a new story.
It's just patterns repeating. However, so some people watching this might not get the whole past life thing. For me, past lives is actually if you think about your parents, your grandparents, and the kind of memories coming through the cells, the epigenetics. Yeah, so it doesn't just have to be like, oh, I was an Egyptian in a past life. It's more about what is the energy that's actually coming
Right.
down through our cells, through
Right.
the intelligence of our parents and grandparents, those cellular memories as well.
And I also acknowledge that past life may not be really real,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
serves a purpose in having a deeper
Yeah.
understanding of things that can't normally be explained
Yeah.
in terms of development and your psyche.
And I think with science, there is like the science of epigenetics where we know it's been explained. I'm not going to go into
Right.
that now, but
Yeah, you did that right.
epigenetics and those cellular memories are a thing. So we're living in bodies where we are actually still experiencing things we've inherited through the genes. We can change
And some
that,
of it's
by
culture,
the way.
some of it's cultural.
Some of it, yeah, it's what we absorb, it's what we inherit. There's a whole mishmash of
Right.
what and how we become what we
Like
are.
I remember when I was a little boy, we played cowboys and Indians. I was always an Indian. I never had an interest in being a cowboy.
Okay, yeah.
So what I experienced was the only resolution
Yeah.
to this dilemma of this existential suffering that we're collectively doing is really what the Buddha talks about. You have to come into the truly awakened state of human enlightenment,
Yeah.
where the ego resolves itself. And so what I found through this process and through all the work that I've done, my own work, but also all the work that I've done, the work that that I'm engaging in with you, and the awake state that's bringing in, the physical awakening
Yeah.
into the physical body. But it always comes back to this realization that the mind has to move into a truly awakened state. And I also realized that the awakened state, the state of enlightenment that the Buddha and other masters historically have talked about, male and female masters throughout history, is as far as I'm concerned, it's the furthest expression of human DNA. There's not an anomaly to our existence. It's actually sort of like all the apples on the apple tree eventually have to turn red.
Yes.
And that's what this is about.
Okay.
But it's emotionally based. So when I get around different spiritual systems that want to just count the emotions, they're like thoughts, they're just passing through the system and not pay attention to them. I don't believe that's true. I believe that because of how we're constructed emotionally, and also because as human beings, one of the things that delineates us from the rest of the animal kingdom is we are the only species on this planet that can weep.
Wow.
We're the
So our
only
dogs
species-
and pets,
They
or
feel emotions.
they can feel it, but they can't actually
They
express
cannot
it
actually
through their
create
eyes.
tears and weep, where the heart
Wow.
feels like it's an
So they
excruciating.
howl, or they squeak, or they can express it
express it.
verbally, but they can't
The
cleanse
weeping,
it.
right.
Wow, in that way. Although they can shake things out.
Well, no, they do. In
Yeah,
fact, you notice the
exactly.
dogs, as soon as they get up, they can start shaking.
100%, so they don't get it stuck inside us. Because
Right.
sometimes I think it's that it's stuck inside us, which is why we have to cry it out. Because whereas animals have their natural response.
Well, the way I would explain actually is one step further. Because
Okay.
when I go back and realize, as infants, this is what we do, till around 3, 4, 5 years old, depending on male and female, and then we're
Yeah.
conditioned to stop crying, to behave,
Yes.
and to stuff the emotions back down.
Yeah.
And we get literally cut off from the deep emotional release. In our adult life, women have a much closer capacity for weeping. Men don't. And
Yeah.
and especially women, I ask women to understand what it would be like not to cry for 20 or 30 years. And most women have I have no idea what that would be like. Most men haven't cried.
Do you know that's so interesting? Because sometimes when I work with men with their mechanics, I remember it with 2 or 3 men in particular, when we actually get their mechanics and their structures to align, they get this spontaneous weeping and they're like really freaked out. So I wonder what that connection, there's a
Because they don't
whole
know, they don't understand the power of their
Yeah,
emotion,
yeah.
and they've been trained to
In
believe that's a
emotion.
sign of weakness.
Yeah,
Where the truth is, for a man to weep, that's a sign of strength, because he knows how to let go.
Yeah. Okay, that's amazing. So the reason we're talking is because actually in December you ended up being in chronic physical pain. Right? And so someone referred you to this woman, Victoria. Can you say about why that was and how we're here now? I'm here now in LA.
Okay, well-
It brought me here to you in the end.
I don't know if I did, but science did.
Yeah.
I think the power of the work is what I'm experiencing is I'm coming into alignment for the first time in my life.
Yeah. So you had chronic back pain.
I had a back injury right before my 30th birthday, which I assume was like my Saturn return. I don't know if many people understand that.
Yeah.
But
28 years.
But it
Saturn,
became the major challenge of my life because
Okay.
I was actually on a path of playing rock and roll guitar and music and running around
Constantly,
dance.
so
I was
many
into
repetitive,
dancing. I was studying dance,
strain all over
and
the place.
all of a sudden, on my 30th birthday, I literally felt, looked, and walked like an 85-year-old man.
Okay.
And I thought, it would just go away in a couple of weeks. And 3 and 4 years later, I was still dealing with extreme chronic pain, sciatica.
Okay. My favorites.
Yeah. I don't know if it's your favorite, wasn't mine.
As in, the ignorance of living in a body creates these things, of not knowing how the body works.
In my whole healing process, literally becoming a healer, I became a healer. I was a warrior shaman in the sense that, I was really looking for vision and doing vision work.
Yeah.
And then once I hurt myself and injured myself, I realized at some point I had to heal myself because there's nothing externally that was bringing me benefit. And that's when I got exposed to Tai Chi and Qigong and yoga and a lot of different modalities. And each one of them maybe took me a little step further and a little step further. It was always like 2 steps forward, 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yes. Yeah.
And I would say by my 60s, I finally got out of chronic pain in my back. And I was able to not walk around with so much holding in my lower back, which was all fear. Fear that if I lost awareness for a second, then I would be down for weeks.
Oh.
And then when I experienced your work, I actually would have to say that was the first time I went, oh wow. I mean, it's moving from just being well adjusted with the injury and pain and being able to I figured I don't walk like an 85-year-old man now.
No, of course not.
But with this work, I actually experienced a level of release and like, oh wow, this is what's in there.
So the
And so it's very
biomechanics.
unique. Yeah. It's very unique. But we were talking today about the electrical, the
Piezoelectric.
the piezoelectric
That
energy.
amazing contraction around the bones. Yeah.
And then we were talking about the human garage work and the twisting and the unwinding.
Yeah.
And also the bone marrow qigong, which is also about spiraling and winding the energy in and out of the bones. And so we're having this interesting conversation about bone marrow and regenerating the health of the bone marrow because this is what creates the red blood cells and some of the white blood cells. And in Chinese bone marrow qigong, some of these masters who live well into their 90s and over 100, and they have these incredibly youthful complexions, and their skin is very baby-like. It's because through the spiraling energy, they've actually regenerated the bone marrow, and they're living in the bone marrow of a young child.
And what I'm saying with the way we're teaching is that when you think you've got your 350 joints in the body, you've got 220 bones, that what we're teaching you is the relationship of those, how to get the piezoelectric effect. But also, we just got you standing differently to Qigong and Tai Chi, right? We gave you permission to engage joints, which a lot of methodologies are saying, no, you have to soften. And we're like, soften them, but also know how to fully
No.
engage.
When I'm combining this now with the Qigong, the Qigong actually really starts working.
Absolutely. So the biomechanics was missing. And the bones, the integrity of what we're teaching is it's right, the hinges inside. And it is extraordinary when I don't mean older as in old people, but I mean people. I always say I'm not here to try and convert anyone. People who think they know everything about everything because they're masters of their art, I'm not here for that. But very often if people are in chronic pain, which you were when you came to me, you were kind of like, just tell me, I'll do anything. I'll do what you tell me. I know I've learned everything I've learned, but I'm still here. I've been going to A&E, I'm in chronic pain. And at that point, I'm like, right, you're going to have to listen to me. And you're going to have to unlearn some stuff you've learned.
That was easy. That was not a problem.
Thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for that.
I was surprised how simple and easy the system was.
Yeah.
And deceptively simple. Because sometimes you think, oh, this is too simple. Is this real?
Yeah. Well, we teach it so a 10-year-old can understand it and a 90-year-old can do it, and anyone in between, you're sorted with us. But the thing is, it's about the bones and joints. It's about coming home to the bones, leaving no bone unturned, as we like to say. And so you've done level 1, you haven't even done level 2 yet, but one of the things you talk about now is when you're walking, and I always talk about enlightenment isn't a moment in time where you get that kind of meditative, it's actually enlightenment is the function of the biomechanics and its relationship with energy, that you literally feel lighter in your body.
Absolutely.
And you talk a lot about now when you walk, your experience putting one foot in front of the other is very, very different. Can you share a bit more about that?
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I noticed is that, when I started like walking, and I guess in one of the sessions there was this image of the way the hips are rotated.
In
I
opposition.
In opposition,
with the
and I
spine in
could
between.
feel that. And so as I was walking, I would actually just see that in my inner vision.
Yeah.
And that fluidity, and also bringing my head above in alignment with the spine, all of a sudden I would feel like I'm floating.
Yep, instead of center of
Instead-
mass
instead of-
crushing,
right.
instead of the misalignments of the
And
pelvis
also,
and the skull.
I noticed that my tendency is to lean in, like I'm rushing ahead in life,
Totally.
like I'm trying to get to the next place, I'm trying to get to the
Totally.
next place, and before you know it, you're at the next place and it's over.
Yeah, and we stack you up, but we don't just stack you up in backwards and forwards, we stack you up in sideways and in rotations, so you get this beautiful spiraling going on all the time. I mean, I'm fascinated when people talk about Kundalini energy, because from my perspective, if people are meditating or they're looking at that, getting that energy on the move, they need to understand the relationship of their sacroiliac joints, where the two sides of the pelvis meet the sacrum and the base of the spine.
Okay.
Because what's happening for most people is that the spine is having to keep them up, instead of the feet and the mechanics of the feet working with the bones of the legs, coming into the two biggest joints in the body, the ball and socket joints, and then the pelvis being free. So actually the spine, that is then keeping the upper body upright, instead of the spine and all this connective tissue and muscles and organs in this contraction. So what you were saying about all those years where you were working with it, and you were working with the energy centers, but what still was absent, and I think in a way that's why I'm here now, it's why we have this great relationship, is because of the foundations and the mechanics of the feet and working up. Because would you agree, because one of the things you said to me was how energetically the energy all feels different once you've got the bones doing what they're there to do.
It's totally different. It's interesting because what you bring up is that when I do get to a place where my pelvis is in the right place and it's released, then the Kundalini actually starts happening and I start getting Kriyas.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, I work very clinically. I keep it very simple in the language, and we know that conversations with different words can turn some people off. But what is interesting is I am also a meditator. I very much function within the dispenser community, and we know that anyone who learns their bones, then the meditation and the energy flow completely transforms.
Them bones.
Them bones! Them bones that I'm obsessed with.
In our conversation just now, I had an interesting flash of why maybe we don't have a tendency to visualize our skeleton, because it is the symbol of death.
Yeah, isn't that, so we're
And so
almost
there's a part of us
allergic
that's not wanting to face that reality, and that's all that's left. That after we kind of desiccate and our tissues are gone,
They
the
outlive
bones
us.
could be there for, actually if they get petrified, they could be there for a couple million years.
Yeah. I mean, I always say your bones will outlive your thinking mind and beating heart. Learn how to use them. They are the strongest part of who and how you are. And that complete disconnect, well, we know the piezoelectric, when you learn to use the muscles and connective tissue with the bones, it generates energy. And if people don't have that quality going on in all the different parts of their body, then they're having to kind of use almost more like adrenaline, and it becomes very stressful and creates collapse. So yeah, we help you switch on all the generators in your body by using your bones, and the best way to do it is to align how you walk. So you've so far done level 1. We hope you're going to move on to level 2.
Okay.
Actually, you did level 1 with Emily, one of my trainees, and it's amazing. So I'll be really very interested to have another conversation with
On the
you
other
when
end.
you've done
You
level
got
2.
it. All right.
Because what I always say is level 1 you're learning how
I'll
all the
meet you in
different
Ibiza.
parts. Yeah, totally, because that's
Yeah.
where Emily is. We're there in June.
That may be a little soon. But
Maybe next year or something. But anyway, and then because at the moment you're still in a stage where you're kind of, it's like driving a manual car. You're using each bit separately. But what we get you to is once all the cogs are switched on, it's a whole other level of programming to get that into autopilot.
I'm looking forward to it.
I'm
It's really
really-
a different experience. It really is a different experience.
Yeah, it's anyway. So what's fascinating is because you are a master with things like Qigong, Tai Chi, and everything. And more as people, well, some of my trainees are yoga teachers. That we're just trying to explain to people that there is something else. None of what we teach with the methodology is an instead of, but it's almost should be a precursor and added in to a lot of those things to give people that untapped power
Yeah, no, it's definitely
of them
untapped power.
bones.
Untapped
Yeah,
power of them
leaving
bones.
no bone unturned. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Here we are in Beverly Hills.
At the Greystone Mansion.
At the Greystone Mansion with fountains and lavender, so we thought we'd just sit down for a chat and record this for, what's the word? What is the word when you record something for all time? Anyway, thank
Thank
you.
you. Okay.
Thank you.